You murdered this man.
Yes,
You tortured him.
of course.
There is no ambiguity, and there is nothing you want to... In court today, you said you're not here to pretend to be remorseful.
Of course not. Why would I do that?
It was around 5 in the morning on August 5, 2009. A call was placed to the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department. It originated at the church. In their parking area, the church observed smoke coming from a trash can. It had been set ablaze. They probably assumed it was just a joke. Youngsters enjoy playing about and starting fires in the most unlikely locations in an effort to annoy their neighbors. Alternatively, perhaps a cigarette was thrown inside. To help with the crisis, the church also contacted the firefighters. Consequently, it didn't spread and unleash havoc. They had no idea that a disaster had already occurred. As soon as they arrived on the scene, firefighters started working to put out the fire. The contents of the bin became visible once the flames subsided, and what they witnessed permanently damaged the observers. According to the firefighters, this find was the most unsettling thing they had ever seen. They found the burnt remnants of a human body inside the garbage bin. Today, we will be delving into the case of Angela Simpson, a chilling tale about a cold-blooded murderer who does not define regret in her dictionary. The church notified the police, who were then contacted to look into the matter and gather more information. The body was removed from the trash so that tests could be performed and the truth could be found. All they could discern about the deceased from his physique was that he was a male. They had no further information. The body was too badly burned to be recognized. It was clear that the body had been mutilated in addition to being charred by the fire when it was retrieved. The body had sustained total harm. It took a serious beating. It was obvious that the person who had committed this horrible deed had a very deep personal grudge against him. This had been done by a very dangerous person. To do what they did, they had to absolutely detest him. Upon closer examination of the corpse, it was also found that the killer had extracted his teeth. It appeared as though his head had been subjected to several blows to the face. A 3-inch nail that had been driven into the skull of the deceased was discovered during the investigation, as if that tortured body wasn't enough. And it doesn't even end there. The autopsy also uncovered over 50 stab wounds throughout the corpse. Besides that, there was an obvious gash across his throat. However, that wasn't the reason he was killed and became lifeless. This man had miraculously survived all that terrible suffering. He was out of this hell. Strangulation appears to have been the cause of death. A wire had left marks all over his neck. This man had endured a whirlwind of torment before being able to leave this planet. There was evidence of healing on all the stab wounds, scrapes, bruises, and wounds on his body. This implied that the torture had started some time before he passed away. According to the authorities, this was one of the most horrific murder cases their agency has ever encountered. It is not an easy task to perform an autopsy on a body that has been burned and dismembered. Now, the task at hand was to identify this individual. Since his teeth had been extracted, dental identification was not possible. It was challenging for the detectives because his fingerprints were burned out by the fire. They typically discovered all of the slightly burned fingers together. They were able to identify the man by recognizing the fingerprint on one finger. Terry Neely was the 46-year-old guy who was tragically killed. Terry was classified as handicapped and was limited to a motorized wheelchair. He could move, albeit extremely slowly if necessary, but he was not entirely paralyzed. He resided in a Phoenix, Arizona, assisted living community. It was perplexing the police. A crippled man who was unable to protect himself. Who would want to harm him? How could this man have done anything to warrant this kind of abuse? To learn more about this kind of abuse, to learn more about this man, the officers traveled to the care facility. They made contact with Terry Neely's caregivers, employees, friends, and acquaintances in an effort to learn more about him and identify anyone who might be connected to the crippled man's murderer. People who regularly interacted with Terry and others who worked at the facility said that he was a kind man who never mistreated, upset, or injured anyone. Despite his disabilities, he remained an amiable and compassionate individual. They had no idea who was against him or if there were any feuds or battles going on. All of the care home's employees and residents were exonerated since they all had an alibi. Where could they start when Terry Neely's life outside of this facility was a total mystery? One crucial piece of information that might significantly strengthen the case was provided by the facility. It had been 3 days since Terry Neely had checked into the institution. He was absent 3 days before his discovery dead on August 2. At approximately 8 p.m., Taylor had left the facility according to the footage from the facility's cameras. What did these 3 days hold? The police had no information at all. Terry didn't know of any friends or relatives who could provide information on this case. It led nowhere. Still, there was one very important question. Where was his wheelchair with a motor? Maybe they could figure out why he died if they could simply locate that wheelchair. Officials launched a search and dispersed around the area in an attempt to locate the chair. We looked around the church and the whole neighborhood carefully. Trash cans had been flipped inside out. People searched the streets. The wheelchair is nowhere to be found. Maybe this was where it ended. This case was ultimately going to land in the cold case files. But hold on. Soon afterward, the Arizona Police Department issued an arrest warrant for a completely different reason in this case. 2 individuals were apprehended on suspicion of armed robbery. 2 people, Edward McFarland, also referred to as Cracker, and Angela Simpson. By coincidence, Terry's acquaintance, Angela, was discovered by the police. After bringing her downstairs to the interrogation room, they began asking her questions regarding Terry Neely. Fortunately, they received more than they had anticipated. Information was not being withheld by Angela Simpson. She readily acknowledged killing Terry, and she did so with great pride.
You murdered this man.
Yes,
You tortured him.
of course.
There is no ambiguity, and there is nothing you want to... In court today, you said you're not here to pretend to be remorseful.
Of course not. Why would I do that?
But hold on. Sometimes people lie in order to appear tough. How can we be certain that she killed the victim? Angela provided the authorities with all the information they required to solve the case, including descriptions of the torture that sent chills down your spine and specifics of the violence that precisely matched the bruises discovered during the autopsy. She acknowledged that she had tortured the man for 3 days straight until he could take it no more. He was made to stare into the mirror while strapped into his torture chair in order to see himself receiving the punishment he deserved. She made him watch as he was beaten, tormented, had a nail driven deeply into his head, and had his teeth violently extracted. She forced him to feel pain with a tire iron. She acknowledged that she had cut his throat just enough to give him pain. She took her knife and stabbed him all over his body. This victim was subjected to unimaginable torture while he was still alive by the vicious woman. Torturing him by pulling out his teeth was her favorite sort of torture, Angela admitted to the police, and she had pliers for it. After bringing him to my house, I kicked his ass, killed him, and walked him upstairs and down the street. She made the decision to carry on after he experienced the beautiful release of death. Angela proceeded to dismember his battered corpse. Even now, she would not let him go. She placed what was left of his body in a trash bag and disposed of it in the church's trash receptacle. She lit the body on fire and left the scene. She merely regretted not torturing him more throughout this occurrence. I could have given him a week to live. Instead of torturing him for 3 days, I would have done so for a week. And I'm sorry I didn't murder my second victim.
Would you, if you had that moment to live over again,
I'd have kept him alive a week.
but you would have still tortured him and killed him?
Oh, I'd have tortured him for a week, yeah, instead of 3 days. Definitely.
So your only regret is that the torture didn't go on any longer.
Right, and I regret not killing my other victim. I should have killed him too. I just didn't have time. I had to go somewhere.
And tell me who that other victim was.
Joseph Van Tress for the armed robbery. Yeah.
It was said that she intended to murder an armed robber. She simply forgot about it since she had to be somewhere at that moment and didn't have time to spare. In contrast to other murderers, Angela appeared to be happy that the authorities had located her. November 29, 1975, is Angela Simpson's birthday. She was also accustomed to a bizarre life, similar to the majority of homicidal criminal minds. She provided very little, if any, personal history. She made no mention of anything other than her condition. Since she was 10 years old, Angela has been going to mental health and psychiatric institutions on a regular basis. It transpires that she was identified as having multiple mental health conditions. One thing is for certain, though, Angela was not raised in a tranquil, loving, or nurturing atmosphere. In addition to her unhealthy lifestyle, Angela did not have a happy upbringing. She went through several foster care systems inside and out. She never even held a regular job that allowed her to demonstrate her witty conversational abilities. Angela made it through her street job. Her entire life she was in hospitals. And as soon as the hospital released her, she dove headfirst into a life of crime and depravity. From there, things just got worse. Angela obtained narcotics. However, her lack of money prevented her from loving him enough to get too involved. Angela began getting her hands filthy in order to obtain cash for her dealer, allowing her to continue experiencing momentary euphoria from her addiction. To make ends meet and pay her dues, she began committing crimes and even tried her hand at prostitution. That's how she ended up confused with Terry Neal. He was one of her regular clients. Terry was led into an abandoned apartment by Angela on the day he vanished, promising drugs and sex. What an addict can't resist is two. The guy rolled into his worst nightmare, poor thing. Angela grew up in a home and environment where crime was accepted as the norm. It was common for people to commit crimes, steal a few items, and wind themselves behind bars. She even said in the interview that she has a large family that is incarcerated, and that's all right with me. Many of my sisters are incarcerated. I'm eager to see them. Being ordered to live with my family for the rest of my life is not actually that terrible of a punishment.
How do you feel about spending the rest of your life in prison?
You know, I got a lot of family in prison, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I got many sisters in prison. I can't wait to see them. It's really not that much of a punishment to be sentenced to spend my life with my family.
It was unclear if she was referring to the people she was close to or her entire family. Of course, in a culture where there is so much violence and crime, mental diseases are equally common. This is most likely the reason that nobody thought Angela was anything unusual or that she might grow up to do such a horrific and inexplicable crime. The killer has never known true love, a lover's companionship, or even family love. Despite being alone, Angela declines to discuss her life or her kids throughout her interrogation with detectives. Angela does not reside with any of the kids. She refuses to talk about their situation or provide them with any details about their biological fathers. She carefully considers every word she speaks and is highly selective about what she discloses. She goes over every detail of her crimes, leaving no stone unturned. On the other hand, Angela remains silent about herself. What drove Angela to carry out such a despicable deed? Terry was a snitch, it seems. Angela reported to the police that Terry had freely acknowledged his involvement in law enforcement and his role in incarcerating others. It seems that he had provided the police with information about other people, leading to their imprisonment. All these people were serving their sentences because of him. Angela became agitated because he had boasted to her that he was an informant. Angela, 36, could hardly wait to announce to the world that she had slain Terry. Angela did not make any concessions regarding the street regulations, even though she was from a wealthy neighborhood. Years ago, he told me about a virtuous guy. That's what he told me. I killed him by beating him. I dismembered and killed him. Snitches, in her opinion, are the most vile individual. She lived by her own moral code, which was very different from that of the majority of society. In her universe, murder was acceptable if the victims were evil, such as informants. Are you experiencing guilt? Feeling guilty? For getting rid of a spy in the world? I don't feel bad at all. She believed that pedophiles and snitches were the filth of the world and should be executed. I think that child molesters and informants should be put to death, clearly. Angela's perception of Terry was drastically altered when she learned about his humanitarian deed. She had decided to make him vanish off the face of the planet because she knew he had to. She revealed in her well-known interview that Terry had given her several names that he had assisted in getting exposed. She acknowledged that she didn't know any of them personally, and that she took his statements to heart. Oops, assuming he wasn't an informant, she said in response to the interview, making her consider the possibility that he wasn't. Angela says she doesn't want her children or the people she has bonded with to live in a society where there are snitches. Not those who torture or kill others with ruthlessness, spies. Upon searching the deserted apartment, the cops discovered a bottle of bleach and pieces of torn carpet. A devoid apartment with a torn-out carpet and no furniture. It was a cover-up of a crime scene, and it was rather clear. They were able to match the victim's blood with the blood that was still all over the location. Angela Simpson entered a guilty plea to Terry Neely's first-degree murder on March 22. Angela received a life sentence in jail. She was given a 14-year prison sentence by Judge Paul McMurdy for further count. Angela acknowledged that she ought to have received the death penalty when discussing her legal system. She was ready for it and thought it was fair, even though it wasn't what she wanted. They claimed that I was under the devil's sway. That is hilarious, in my opinion. Isn't that lovely? Nothing is more terrifying than someone who has nothing to lose. For her to behave in such a cruel manner, she must have had a really difficult childhood. She is among the most vicious murderers we have ever come across. They are also the riskiest, as you can never be sure what will happen next. Her direct and collected style of speaking is both interesting and frightening at the same time. If you watch this interview closely, you'll see that she seems to be putting on a front for the camera because of the way she changes her mood later. Her use of language is obviously out of control. It sounded more like she was discussing a typical day in her life than a brutal murder. An authentic archetypal sociopath. A woman it would never be wise to tamper with. When it came to her transgression, she displayed no regret. In her jail interviews, she went so far as to say that she was disappointed that she had missed the chance to kill additional informants. In prison, Angela does not intend to be easily subjugated. To make people uncomfortable, she makes violent sexual pictures of police officers and gives them to them. She wants everyone to know that she has the power to fulfill their darkest fantasies. Regarding Angela, Sergeant Pike speaks, I find Simpson to be a very frightening person. She is most likely the only one in there for whom I take extreme care to ensure the safety of both myself and my employees. I'm creeped out by her more than anyone else in this entire jail. Sometimes she will stare you down. And you get a stand-up from the tiny hairs on the back of your neck. To put it mildly, she is an unusual character. When asked if it's hard to dismember a body, Angela replied that it's not as hard as one may think. She even encouraged the interviewer to give it a try, by pointing out how inexpensive it is. Generally speaking, women don't commit crimes this horrible, right? This is largely a man's realm. That is regrettable. Child molesters rank first on her ranking of the worst and most repulsive animals to have ever lived on Earth. Snitches come in second on the list. Third place goes to police officers. Murderers are not even close to being on the list. Every murderer, in Angela's view, has a motive. It's almost like you have to pull some of the bad weed. Naturally, though, her inventory of undesirable plants differs greatly from the rest of society's. Rather than focusing on the murderer, you should look at the deceased. You never mess with someone who is not afraid of anything, as they say. Someone who is merely unconcerned. Are you going to kill again? I hope so, should the chance present itself. That was Angela Simpson's situation. Thanks for tuning in with us, and if you liked the video, please click the like and subscribe button.